Greetings, fellow humans. Katrina here. Quick disclaimer, I'm a professional. I'm not your professional. Nothing I'm about to say should be taken as medical, legal, or otherwise advice. This podcast is purely for education and amusement. That is it. Disclaimer over. So today I figured I'd talk a bit about what I don't know about anxiety. So there's three or four ways that I thought I'd tell you about reducing anxiety. So how to reduce anxiety? Here we go. Step one, acknowledge the anxiety. Well, that's frustrating because I know a lot of times when we experience an uncomfortable emotion, we try to not feel that. If I try to not feel anxiety, well, it's kind of like fighting in quicksand. If you fight in quicksand, you will sink quicker. Same with anxiety. So they say that if you can name it, you can tame it. So if you verbalize, I'm having anxiety right now, that in and of itself can reduce the anxiety. Also, paying attention to the physical sensations. So acknowledge your heart rate, your breath, the tightness, if you have any tightness in your chest or knots in your stomach, acknowledge those things. And like I said, name it. Second thing to reduce anxiety is to consciously activate the parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system. Oh, that's a lot of big words, right? So the autonomic nervous system is this thing that happens pretty automatically, and it'll just continue to keep us breathing until we die. However, we can consciously shift how that works by using like deep breathing techniques. TIP is one from the dialectical behavioral perspective. Different things to stimulate the polyvagal nerve. If you've ever heard of the polyvagal nerve theory, all of this activates the more calming side of our nervous system, the rest and digest side, the side that lets us know that everything is okay right now. The third way to reduce anxiety is to cope ahead. Now, this technique comes straight out of Marsha Linehan's work, dialectical behavioral therapy stuff. And it is where we picture the worst case scenario. And this is the part that most people don't do, because we can all picture worst case scenario over and over, this and that. And what if that? Yeah. Oh, those are my ducks, but I don't have to go yet. The worst case scenario and then surviving through it. So short of death, anything short of death, imagine yourself going through the worst case scenario and surviving through it. Because then when we have that in our mind that we can survive anything or any possible thing that could come our way, then that can alleviate the anxiety of what if this, what if that, because we know if XYZ happens, I will be okay. And that being okay is kind of the goal of reducing the anxiety, reminding our unconscious mind or the more primitive side of the brain that it's like, shh, it's going to be okay. Fourth, on how to reduce anxiety is to use your coping skills. So a coping skill is anything that you use to help you deal with a particular emotion or situation or thought. And so that can be anything. It can be anything under the sun. It can be walking, reading, listening to music, grounding. Let me tell you about grounding real quick. So grounding is when we reorient ourselves to the present moment using mindfulness and particularly looking at our five senses. So see, hear, touch, smell, taste. We're going to go through those five things and think about what is coming into those senses. So by focusing on like five things that you can see, four things that are within your reach to touch, three things you can hear, two to smell, and one to taste, by going through those things, it reorients us into the fully present moment and keeps us on track with, okay, nothing needs to be done right now. Sometimes anxiety can be a perceived threat. So not even an actual threat. That would be where fear comes in, but a perceived threat or an irrational fear, something that we know isn't going to hurt us, can cause anxiety to happen. And so these four ways that I mentioned are ways to reduce that level of anxiety to a more manageable level, because some anxiety is good. Some anxiety can help us be productive. If you look at some of those things online that say, like, if you have the right amount of anxiety plus control, you get into like this flow state. And that's like the sweet spot of productivity. So just to review, the four ways that I am saying are potentially helpful, but I don't know because I don't know all the ways to reduce anxiety. So the 4 ways that came to my mind were number 1, acknowledge that anxiety. Number 2, consciously activate that parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system. Third was cope ahead, and fourth was use those coping skills. And one last thing on the coping skills, they can be internal or external. So internal coping skills, anything that cannot be taken away from you. External is anything that can be. All right, well, I hope y'all enjoyed today. There's no news today because I didn't feel like it. And I figure if I don't feel like it, why do it? So hope you enjoyed the ways to reduce anxiety. And if you want to support the show, click the button on the website. Remember, I appreciate each and every one of you simply for existing.